today. We are going to be recording this, so we're happy to have you ask questions in the chat. We're going to go through a few of the little reminders for our meeting today. We will be reviewing the Industrial Revitalization Fund program with you today, but to reduce background noise, go ahead and make sure you are on mute during the call if possible. If you have a question, feel free to put those in the chat feature. You will notice throughout on the left side of the screen there, you'll see that. If you have any questions, please feel free to do that at any time. Annie Arness, our Community Revitalization Specialist, is going to be presenting the material, and I will help moderate questions as well. If you're having trouble hearing the presenter or seeing the presentation, please let me know. If you're participating by phone, you will not have access to the chat feature, so please unmute yourself and ask the question as there is a pause or a quiet moment within the presentation. Just a couple other reminders. If you have questions later, we are always available to answer them throughout the period between now and application due date. So if you have questions of DHCD, obviously contact myself or Annie with those questions. So just to go over today's agenda, we're going to give a little bit of an overview of the program, the types of properties that are eligible for the program, how the funding works, the application details, scoring, and then we will have hopefully some time there at the end to answer any questions. Just a little bit of an overview of DHCD. For any of you who are not familiar with our agency, we are committed to creating safe, affordable, prosperous communities to live, work, and do business in Virginia. That encompasses our housing division, the community development division, which the Industrial Revitalization Fund is housed within. We have our building and fire regulation division, as well as supporting offices around policy and legislative services and the Commission on Local Government. So what is the IRF program? It is a fund to rehab large-scale derelict structures no longer suited for their original purpose. Hold on, let's let all these folks in. To catalyze revitalization by eliminating blight through market-driven redevelopment. And that's a little bit of a mouthful, but we'll go through what all of those elements mean as we roll into the presentation. The program allows for grants or loans up to $600,000. We do have an annual allocation of funding, and we will have a summer application deadline, which we will get into in a little bit. Who is eligible to apply? Local governments. So that would be your towns, cities, counties, and or quasi-government, economic development authorities, redevelopment authorities, and things like that. So they can apply on behalf of a nonprofit or a for-profit. So just to give a little bit of an overview of what we have available this year, we have $1.5 million for fiscal year 22. So we are already thinking about our funding for next year. Keep going, Annie. So the intent of the IRF program really is to incentivize the redevelopment of these shovel-ready projects that incentivize private investment and job creation. So we're looking for projects that really take that large kind of white elephant structure in your community, in your downtown, or a significant redevelopment opportunity, and revitalize that into a market-driven purpose. So some of the examples you see there on your screen include an old ice plant that was turned into Trapezium Brewery in Petersburg, and a derelict hotel in the town of Wise that was revitalized back into a hotel with conference space and restaurant. So it's really taking these structures that have been vacant and derelict for many years and bringing them back to life. Next slide. So since 2012, we have assisted 34 projects across Virginia. We've generated 121 million in public and private investment with these funds, and we've created more than 485 jobs. So that's pretty impressive for the small amounts of money that we have been given. We've really leveraged this program to create some really exciting projects in Virginia. So as noted earlier, the program is really targeted towards vacant and deteriorated properties. And you know these properties in your community when you see them. Lots of times they are former schools, former warehouses, those buildings that former industrial type buildings that really do need additional investment to revitalize. So as I mentioned, here's some eligible properties: manufacturing, warehousing, mining, transportation, hotels, really any kind of large scale building you might have in your downtown. What we don't fund with IRF funding is solely residential properties or scattered sites. So we wouldn't take our funding and split it up amongst multiple properties in your community. And we don't do greenfield. We don't just demo and have a green site for redevelopment. We can do mixed use properties. So to go back kind of to the residential, we can do mixed use as long as the property is at least 30% commercial. So if you had a 3-story building and one of those 3 stories would be commercial, with the balance to be residential, that would be eligible for IRF funding. As I noted earlier, only local governments may apply for the application. So that would be the cities, counties, or towns. We also do allow regional or local economic development authorities or industrial development authorities to apply. We do require that the locality pass a resolution stating that this is their highest priority project. So we only allow 1 application per locality in each funding cycle. As you heard earlier, we have a limited pot of money, so we really need each locality to determine their highest priority project. So if you are applying for grant funding, here are the stipulations. The property must be publicly owned. If a private owner is under contract to purchase it, that would need to be in place at the time of the application. If it's privately owned by a nonprofit or tax-exempt entity, that can also be a grant. So for a grant, it would need to be a nonprofit end use or a publicly owned property. And for our grant loan, so the way that works is we would make a grant to the locality or to the Industrial Development Authority or the Economic Development Authority, and then they would loan those funds to the private for-profit entity that would be doing the project. So that might be the developer or the end user of the property, or if the property is just outright is privately owned by a private for-profit business. So to go through the match, the IRF funding does require a 1-to-1 match. So for every $1 that you apply for with IRF funding, you must also have another $1 of other funding. That can be from private or public sources, and public sources can be local, state, or federal. It does not matter. All of the funding that you would count as match must be spent on the building July 1st, 2020 or sooner. So we will go all the way back to July of this year for to count the match. So if they've spent any funding on repairing roof or doing some improvements, we can count that as match. Anything prior to that, we would not count as match. It's only for costs associated with the building, physical improvements to the property, engineering, architectural fees, things like that. Here's a list of those eligible match: acquisition of the building, dumping fees, things like that, as you're hauling off things to the dumpster. What does not count as a match is state and local taxes, site remediation, and then those furnitures, fixtures, and equipment that really are not considered to be capital improvements to the building. So it does need to be associated with the construction of the building to be considered match. And then if you are successful, we do have a contract and performance agreement that we will have you sign with us. So this is stating that the project will be completed within 18 months and kind of outlines the process for requesting funds from DHCD and the outcomes that we anticipate as part of the project. So that is if you are successful and receive IRF funding, we will have a contract with the locality as well as a performance agreement with the developer, or expect that from the locality. And then I'm going to turn this next section over to Annie to kind of go into how the program funding priorities line up and to get more into the application details. So Annie, if you want to take it from here.
Okay, there we go. Unmute myself. Let me pull my screen back up. All right, thanks, Joy. So here are the priorities we focus on when reviewing IRF applications. We found that projects ranking high in these categories at the time they apply are the best suited to become transformative and successful redevelopments. So number one, relationship to a local or regional economic development strategy. Number two is a high degree of blight and deterioration to be addressed. Number three is your project readiness. Number four, project with a clear end use. Number five, an end use that has a clear and significant community economic impact. And number six, a high economic distress in your project locality. We've directly associated our scoring with those categories, and you can see in the chart here exactly how we weigh them. In the presentation today, we'll review all of the specific application questions and which categories they fall into. Overall, a strong potential project is one that can prove it's ready to go, but cannot be completed without the addition of IRF funding. Here's our timeline for the upcoming fiscal year 22 round. Beginning today, you can register your organization in CAMS and start your application. All applications will be due July 31st, 2021. We will then begin our internal review and recommendations and expect award announcements by late fall. All projects for FY22 must be ready to sign a contract or performance agreement by January 1st, 2022. Okay, so to get started, you'll create your organization's profile in CAMS, our internal management system. Follow the link and directions here. And as always, our staff is available if you run into any questions as you're getting set up with the system. Once you're registered here, you'll be able to begin the application process. After logging in, select the Applications and Programs option. And from this next page, select Apply, then Industrial Revitalization Fund from the drop-down menu. Go ahead and click Apply to get started. Be sure to save each page as you go. You can sign out of CAMS and return back to the application at any time until July 31st, but be sure to keep on saving. We ask for the overall project budget, providing fields and categories for you to complete along with a narrative section. The budget is key to helping us understand what activities IRF specifically is being requested to fund. Please use the budget narrative to give a brief description of the sources of non-IRF funds and all activities anticipated for this project. Next, we're looking for all the basic information and a solid introduction to your proposed project. We've provided a summary sheet for you to fill out and request that you give some narrative as well. Discuss the overall project from start to finish, including the intended end use and the specific activities to be undertaken with the IRF funds and associated match. Indicate if the IRF project is the project in its entirety or one phase of a larger project. Now for the questions relating to funding priority number 1, which was a clear relationship to a local or regional economic development strategy. We ask that you provide detail on any local or regional strategies and explain how this project ties in with those goals. Also provide at this point a summary of any recent or upcoming projects in the area that will contribute to or benefit from this proposed project. Paint a picture for us of what's been happening in the area, the local support, and your future plans. Priority number 2 was a high degree of blight and deterioration. Please discuss the current state of the property, how that is affecting the surrounding neighborhood, and why this project in particular is a top priority for your community. Use both this section and the requested photographs to give a full sense of the current condition and concerns. As we've mentioned, project readiness is key when we're reviewing applications. Please use this chart to give us a sense of where you are, providing information like the activities completed so far, zoning, and any potential needed changes there, and status on things like tax credits, financing, and project design. Use the narrative section to give a clear picture of who owns the property, what's been done to date, and any potential obstacles you face for completion. Let us know about the developer in the following question and provide as much detail as you can, either about the chosen developer or, if one has not been procured yet, your intended process and timeline for securing one. Here we also ask you to complete a chart with your match funding information. Please keep in mind what qualifies as eligible match and provide the status of each source of funding. The next few questions focus on priorities number 4 and 5, about a project with a clear and impactful end use. Here's a chance to support your application with any relevant market research, business plans, performas, and so on that you can cite here and also provide as attachments. If an end use has been identified, please include any leases, agreements, or commitment letters as an attachment. Discuss the intended end use of the property and provide as much detail as you can regarding potential economic impact, business and operation plans, and number of anticipated jobs you'll be creating. Primary impact like full and part-time jobs, new businesses, and leveraged private investment, as well as the secondary impact on taxes, tourism, etc., are an important factor for us in determining how catalytic of a project this may be. For funding priority number 6, we ask you to reference our economic distress chart to provide your community's ranking. We have made some updates to the chart and methodology for this upcoming year. So here I'll turn it back over to Joy to discuss those changes.
So in the past, we had three, there you go. We had 3 different criteria that we used for determining distress, unemployment, median household income, and poverty. Those were separated out into 6 categories of distress, from high distress to no distress. And there was 150 points maximum. We are not proposing to change that. Under the former methodology, there were 42 localities, cities, and counties of high distress, which got the maximum amount of points, and 32 localities, which indicated no distress. So for this point going forward, we have also considered unemployment, fiscal stress, and poverty. And what makes up the fiscal stress component is revenue capacity per capita, revenue effort, and median household income. And those are criteria that are based on the locality's ability to have bring in revenue, which is really part of the catalytic nature of our IRF projects. So we felt like this would be a better indicator, which also does include the median household income, to calculate distress. So what it would be for 2022, there would be 4 categories of distress. and they're a little bit spread out more than they were for the former methodology. We have 29 communities that are considered high distress and 11 that are no distress. So we feel like this is a little bit more of an accurate way to calculate distress. As you can see here, Andy's showing you the localities that are considered highly distressed and above average. But we do want to hear from you. If you want to take a look at the program information from 2021 and compare that to 2022, we're happy to take any input. We currently are going to be taking this distress chart to the Department of Housing and Community Development's board for approval. So this is our proposal for calculating distress for the fiscal year 2022. So if you see your county name in here or your city, if you are a town within a county and you do not feel like this accurately represents the level of distress in your community, we do have a town calculator that will help us calculate which level of distress that you would fall into. And you can ask for that upon request.
Thanks, Joy. So we also allow for some extra credit. Please fill out the associated chart here, which asks for details on things like local incentives, designated area allocations, bonus for match in excess of the 1-to-1 match, and additional points for committing to include SWAM certified contractors and subcontractors in your bidding process. Up to 5% additional points can be awarded based on the answers here. We ask for certain attachments like a local assurance that the information in the application is accurate and the property is blighted, as well as a resolution from the local governing body citing the proposed match funds. We provide examples of both of these in the application materials. As mentioned earlier, we welcome attachments that further support the story of your project. Photographs are required, and then things like maps, market research, performas, business plans, any signed leases, construction documents, and so on are helpful to have as well. The more information provided at the time of application, the greater the evidence that the project is ready to proceed. Here's a map of the IRF projects we've funded. We just recently announced this year's recipients, which are the Millwood Theater in Wytheville, the Gish Mill redevelopment in Vinton, and the redevelopment of a former hardware store into a brewery in Warsaw. And here's a list of the 34 projects we've done to date to give you a sense that it's not just industrial buildings. We do a lot of schools, theaters, hotels, breweries, all kinds of projects. So I hope that gives an idea of what we're looking for as you work your way through the application. We have updated this year's application to include more charts and summary sheets. This will make it easier for us as we review the basics of each project, but also want the remaining narrative sections to serve as a chance for you to really tell your story and show us why this project is important for your community. Thanks for joining us today, and now we'll open it up to any questions.
Yes, feel free to put any questions in the chat, and I will work to moderate those. Pulaski County, didn't see it on the list. We will double check that. I think we got all the localities, but
Pulaski?
Mm-hmm.
Here, it's on the above average, towards the bottom right.
Any other questions from anyone participating?
Hey, Joy, this is Heather in Hopewell. I do have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So can you help me to understand a little bit better what the process is to go from, I guess, private ownership to the city having an option? So for instance, in Hopewell, we currently have an option on the building that we're hoping to apply for IRF funding for. So that ends in April. So then will we have to negotiate for the city to take over the option? And then is my organization essentially writing the grant and then having the city kind of plug that in, or what does that all look like?
The application does need to come from either the city or the city's industrial development authority, if they have an authority like that, or if there's like a redevelopment housing authority or something of that nature, quasi-government, they do have to be the applicant on behalf of the nonprofit. If there is an option in place, it either needs to be extended in that situation, or the town would take over that option depending on whatever you all are doing locally, if you do intend to purchase it, in order for us to consider it to apply for a grant.
Okay, thank you. Sorry if I was supposed to type that.
That's okay. We do have a question. Are you able to demo a site and replace it with a structure that is used for a market-driven purpose? I won't say that is not an eligible activity. However, the program is really geared toward rehabbing existing structures. And funding, our score sheets and our funding really do weigh heavier on the redevelopment of properties rather than the reconstruction and new construction. For those that apply this year and ran into funding challenges due to COVID, any possibility that prior matching funds can be used as match? We can work with you individually on that if it's a reapplication. That was from Pam Wagner, and I'm assuming that's with Arcadia Theater. They're in Stanton. We can definitely, we'll talk to you individually on that to see what might be able to carry over depending on, because you had applied before. IDA or EDA can apply for IRF funding as a grant. Yes, that is correct, Kelvin. An IDA or EDA can apply. However, we still need the local government resolution from the city or county. Yes, you can get a copy of the presentation. Liz Russell asked. We will be posting this on DHCD's website, the materials here. We also will be posting a draft of our application materials. However, again, as I mentioned, they will need to be approved by the DHCD board because we are proposing to change that distress criteria. Tom Roberts. Yeah. I don't know what to say about Lexington versus Buena Vista. It is crazy pants. All right. So Jenny asked the question. So we can ask for funding for a building that is privately owned as long as the end use will be a publicly owned business. So it does not necessarily need to be owned by the town. I'm not sure about that scenario, but a locality can apply on behalf of a privately owned business. However, it will be considered a loan. It would be considered a loan to a privately held building and business. If the end result is a publicly owned business, I don't know any publicly owned business. Give me an example, Jenny, if you will, in chat. Of what you mean by a publicly owned business. Okay, confused by the last. So just to kind of review the question around grant versus loan, publicly owned, privately owned. So if a property is currently publicly owned, say the town, county owns the building, and a nonprofit is going to redevelop, say it's going to be and we'll just use one of the properties that we just funded, the Millwall Theater there in Whitfield. It is owned by the nonprofit. The town has applied for the funding. A nonprofit will redevelop that building into a theater. So in that case, it will be a grant. We will supply the grant to the town, who will then in turn grant the funding to the project. In the example of the town of Benton that we just funded with the Gish Mill, That property is currently owned by the town, but the town is working to transfer the property to a private developer. We will grant the funding to the town. The town will then, in turn, through their Economic Development Authority, or the county's Economic Development Authority, loan that to the developer, who will then take ownership of the building and redevelop that property. So those are a couple of examples just from our recent funding to kind of show you the two different scenarios. So how long does the town have to own it before they can sell it without penalty? So our period of what we would call compliance is 10 years. So the property must be used for the purpose that we funded it for 10 years. If at any point in time it is sold or changes use within those 10 years, we will expect a prorated repayment of our grant back to DHCD. And we have documents in there. We have deed restrictions. We have different covenants that do outline that as if you are successful and we do move forward with a contract with you. So it's a 10-year performance period. Any other questions? The development LLC was formed, but the town was part of the LLC and the town owns the property. Will it be a grant? I don't know that a town can be part of an LLC, can it? I don't know. I'm not an attorney. Do you know, Annie, do you have any insight on that? Yeah. Grayson Williams, can you let us know what locality you're in? And be sure to follow up with us on that, because I am curious to know what project you're working on, and we can kind of think through in more detail how that works. Accomack County, Chincoteague Firehouse. Okay. So Heather has a question. The targeted building in Hopewell is currently privately owned. The developer wants to purchase and redevelop the building. So the city needs to get an option on the building, then apply, and then loan the IRF funds to the developer to acquire the building. The city never technically acquires the building. Is this correct? I don't know why the city would need an option if they could just broker a private transfer of the property. We can talk in more detail, Heather, on that for sure. But yes, if it is a private for-profit end use, regardless of how the building gets transferred to the developer, it would be a loan, either through the city or through Economic Development Authority or some other entity that, and if the city doesn't want to do it, or there is no Economic Development Authority or Industrial Development Authority, we do partner with Virginia Community Capital to underwrite those funds and loan to the developer. So that it can go either option. Back to the question that Grayson Williams had, Kyle's mentioning that it's possible the tax credit syndication is the LLC piece, and that could be that. You're right, Kyle. That could be why that's set up that way. That's a good point. It could be for historic or other types of tax credit purposes. Okay, so Heather's that the local government need to have an option on the building. That is if the local government wants to purchase the building to do the end use development. That would not be for private purposes. Any other questions? These are great questions. You guys have so many questions. One thing that I will say while we have a break, waiting on more questions to roll in, please reach out to us between now and July. We would love to talk to you individually about your project and hear more about what you're doing. We can walk through some of the issues or challenges or opportunities, hear a little bit more about what your project is. That really does give us a better sense of the project rather than just reading it on the paper. It is so much easier for us to talk to you in person and get a better idea and help you create the best project application that you can for us. We are always happy to provide that technical assistance. and I don't know, Annie, if you have our contact slides and want to throw that up there, you can reach out to myself or Annie or even Rebecca Rowe with the Community Revitalization Office. She is our Associate Director. Reach out to any of us, and we'll be more than happy to chat with you about your project individually and give you way more time than we would have on this call. So Brenda asked, is there new guidance? Yes, we after today, we will be posting that, or hopefully posting that on DHCD's website. Again, those will be temporary or draft until the DHCD board is able to approve those. But it is, the application will be live in CAMS now because the distress criteria won't change. The distress criteria would be the only element that would be up for consideration to really be changed. And the slides will be available on the website, we're hoping, today or tomorrow. It just depends on when we can get our webmaster to get these up. But yes, we will have these available for you on the website. There is an dhcd.virginia.gov/IRF, and that should take you directly to the page. And just check back there in the next day or two, and these slides should be up on the website. Any last questions before we let you guys go? Thank you so much for all of your time and attention, and we look forward to getting some great projects in for this next cycle. Again, like I said, we're available to chat with you about your project individually, and we love hearing about great redevelopment projects happening in Virginia. Any other closing words from you, Annie? You're mute. Sorry, I put you on the spot.
Let's see. Yeah, sorry. Thank you all for joining. And as Joy said, we look forward to hearing about your projects. Reach out to us anytime.
Thanks, everybody.